WF International. And as I said, this will be a panel on landscape finance. But before I introduce the panel to you, I want to explain to you what is actually landscape finance, right? And then to put a little bit of the context. So next slide, please, Adana. So to put it a bit in context, let's have a look at how the money flows in this world. And this is the amount of money that goes to the things that are contributing to protection and restoration of nature, but also the flows of money that are going to activities that are degrading nature. And you see here that the amount of money that's going to nature positive finance is only 200 billion a year, and the majority of that money is provided by the public sector, by governments. On the other side of the nature negative finance, you see a number of 7 trillion a year, and the majority of that is actually coming from the private sector. 5 trillion of nature negative finance is invested by the private sector. Next slide, please. So in order to change this situation, we need to really address the nature finance gap. And the Paulson Institute estimated that the amount of money that the world needs annually is 742 billion every year that needs to be invested in nature positive activities. That's the current gap on nature finance. And that gap will never be filled by philanthropy. It will never be filled by tax money from governments. So we need to double down on mobilizing private finance to nature positive action. Next slide. So that's why WF developed a new strategy, which is called the landscape finance approach. So today we're launching a guide that we developed together with the Sustainable Finance Coalition and Conservation Capital, where we explain how we build on this landscape approach, right? So the landscape approach is not new, and it's a holistic vision at the landscape level. And when I say landscape, you can also think about seascapes. And the landscape approach is really a holistic approach that takes nature protection and restoration in consideration, but also understands that economic and social development needs to happen in these geographic areas. So landscape approach is not new, it has been existing for decades. But what this landscape finance approach is doing now is build a layer of finance on top of that to accelerate and scale nature protection. And we have two sub-strategies. One is financing green, which is really mobilizing more private capital which is aligned with this landscape approach. And the other one is greening finance, because we also need to close the tap of finance going to activities that we don't want. So there's more regulation needed from central banks. There's more disclosure needed at the bank level, but also banks need to set targets on how they want to operate when it comes to nature, and have to develop transition plans towards nature positive. And they've already started doing that on net zero, and now the new frontier is nature positive. Next slide, please. So we think that this landscape finance approach will increase the bankability of projects and companies that contribute to nature positive, but we also think it can reduce risks. And how will that happen? So on one hand, we will double down on blended finance and stacking revenue streams of nature positive action. So think about carbon credits, but also revenue streams coming out of silver production. We often hear the complaint that nature positive actions are the ticket size, the amount of investment is too small for banks and investors to pick up. So we think that with this landscape finance approach, we can aggregate to larger ticket sizes and make it more investable, bankable. But still at the landscape level, and we will talk about it in a panel, there's still a lot of regulatory, physical and reputational risk for companies and banks to invest. So it's not only action needed at a bank or investor or company level, but also governments and regulators need to step up to make these investments possible. And finally, really important, we need to involve local and indigenous people in developing these landscape visions and make sure that the investments are really aligned with the needs of the local people in these landscapes. Next slide, please. So to make it a bit more tangible, I want to share one example with you. This is from Zambia in Africa. And this is a big wetland, which is called the Kafue Flats, where people live, about 500,000 people live, but also companies operate in this landscape, and global companies source from this landscape. So social, economically very important landscape. Next slide, please. But biodiversity is going down. So we've seen a reduction in key species with 80% in the last 40, 50 years. So WWF is not successful in bending the curve of nature decline in this landscape. Next slide. And why is that? Well, there's all kinds of economic activities happening in this landscape that is degrading this very important wetland. So think about hydropower, think about over-extraction of natural resources, think about pollution. Next slide. So if you think at the level of a company, so take a sugar company that is producing here, the sugar company is impacting this wetland by taking water out of the wetland or polluting, but it's also dependent on that wetland, right? So it's also dependent for its water resources and producing sugar. So we need to develop business models for the sugar company and for other companies in this very important landscape that are aligned with a nature positive vision and with a landscape approach in this particular place. Next slide. So this is the landscape finance approach that we developed for this Kafue Flats wetland in Zambia. So on one hand, greening finance. So we are working with central banks to start regulating on banks that are lending to companies and incentivize these companies to address water-related risks in the way they operate and in the way they lend into these companies. But also Zambian banks and global banks need to start disclosing how they are exposed to the nature-related risk in these landscapes. They need to set targets on nature and develop transition plans that are aligned with this landscape approach. So that's on the greening finance side. But on financing green side, we developed a whole pipeline of bankable and non-bankable interventions that could be aligned with this landscape approach. So think about water efficient irrigation or sustainable cattle ranching or renewable energy that will take away a little bit of the pressure from the hydropower. So there's a whole range of potentially investable projects that we... You can't hear? Yeah, you can hear me. So on the back of this, WWF and partners are now originating bankable deals in this landscape, and we hope to attract 100, 200 million in the coming years to make this vision a reality. Next slide. So we started testing this landscape finance approach in the past year in about 6 landscapes. And we already have secured some catalytic financing to really implement this landscape finance approach in these landscapes. And we have an ambition to mobilize 20 billion in the coming 4 to 5 years to these landscapes, but also many other landscapes. But WWF cannot do this alone. So we need to build a coalition of NGOs, of banks, of companies that think that this landscape finance approach can be catalytic to mobilize the money and to contribute to this nature financing gap. So I think that's my last slide. Next slide, please, Dana. So with that, I'm inviting some potential partners that can become a part of this coalition of the willing and can be a part of this landscape finance approach. So can I invite the panelists to get to the stage, please? Right. Yeah, now I'm here myself, which is a bit confusing. But welcome everyone, and welcome to the panel. We're missing one panelist, which is Zhao Adrian. So I hope he's on his way, and probably he's stuck outside the door because there are big queues outside. But so let me introduce the panel first, and then I'll move to some questions. And also keep your questions for till the end, because there's plenty of space to talk. So on my left, I have Fernanda Facchini, who is a part of the Natura company. Then next to Fernanda, I have Lieke Verhofstadt from Rabobank. Then next to Lieke, I have Siloshni Naido from the Development Bank of South Africa. And next to Siloshni, I have Mireille Attala from UNEP. So welcome everyone. A very female panel. Very proud of that because often sometimes I'm accused of having a gender-based panel, but this time we got it right. Yeah. But we might need one more man, right? Okay. So let's hope Zhao will still arrive. Okay. So let me kick off with my question. So I'll start with you, Fernanda. Um, so this whole landscape finance approach, how does it resonate with you? And then on the back of that, how do you, as a cosmetics company, how do you view investing in nature? And can you maybe also give some examples of that, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Natura is a Brazilian cosmetic company that is based here in Brazil, but we are operating basically in the Latin America countries. We used to be a multinational company operating with 4 brands, but nowadays we have only 2 brands. Natura, that is Brazilian, Avon, that came from the US. And for us, investing in nature is basically investing in the center of our strategy because our business are based in nature since the beginning. We are using natural ingredients in our formulas for more than 25 years. So we developed our value chains here in the Amazon rainforest. We have more than 55 ingredients that we could develop it with the local communities, and we are paying them for benefit sharing. So we are combining these investments to sustain the resilience of our business. So we are committed with SBTI, we are committed with SBTN, and we are already applying TCFD, and now we are applying TNFD in our business. So this combination, I think it's very important for us to combine innovation, resilience, and generation of income for the families that are here, because we need to talk about nature, but we need to take care about people.
Thanks, Fernanda. And actually, Lieke, same question to you. So how does it resonate?
Oh, sorry. No worries. How does it resonate for Rabobank? Well, for those who don't know Rabobank, we are a food and agricultural bank based in the Netherlands.
Speak up a bit.
Closer?
Yep.
Okay. We're a food and agricultural bank based in the Netherlands but operating globally. We finance the entire food value chain from farm to fork. And we have offices around the world. So Brazil is a very big office for us as well. North America, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and Asia. So landscape finance for us, I would say, so in the Netherlands it might not be very new, because in the Netherlands we are used to work in landscapes. It's called gebiedsgerichte aanpak in good Dutch. So in the Netherlands we actually know about it, and I think there's a very nice example, a financial tool which we built together with WWF actually, and a big dairy company in the Netherlands, which is called the Biodiversity Monitor. And in that tool we set a few KPIs for farmers in a specific region. Dairy farmers first, arable farmers in a later stage. We created that tool as well. But if they reach those KPIs, they would receive an incentive from Rabobank, which is a discount on their interest loan. But not only from Rabobank. So they also would get a premium from the dairy company. But they would also get a discount from the water company and maybe some tax advantages from the local government. So I think this is a nice example of how a landscape can work, because you gather a lot of stakeholders in the same region and you try to stack the rewardings for the farmers, like in ecosystem service payments, which we like is a buzzword here at COP as well. So I think in the Netherlands it's more or less common to work in landscapes, right? But in other countries, in other regions, in other offices of Rabobank, it's not that common yet. And as Rabobank, we really want to learn what it means in, for example, Brazil. We are very big in Brazil. We have a lot of clients in the Cerrado. So this is something we are now exploring. What can our role be in like a landscape like Cerrado? So yeah, very interesting to be in the panel and
That's a great
looking forward.
example, Lika, and I think I showed this aggregation model in my first slide, and I think the biodiversity monitor is a great way to aggregate clients to one credit line and apply the same nature-related metrics to that, right? So to Sulishni, I showed a country in your backyard, and probably also some of your clients are in Zambia. So can you reflect on this landscape finance approach and how DEPSA is already engaged on this?
Thank you. So I think for us as an infrastructure bank, it is extremely important to actually incorporate nature-based design in the infrastructure that we do and we promote, mainly from a sustainable development perspective. The way in which we currently obviously taking advantage and trying to incorporate the principles in is because we have access to highly concessional finance. Being an accredited agency, for instance, to GEF, GCF, and so forth, we have the ability to obviously ensure that we can access that financing, and then obviously that promotes the ability of our clients and so forth to lower their cost of the investment, but then also to ensure that we mobilize that finance that we have access to. So what we do at the moment at the bank is through our project preparation facilities, which really is where, concept type projects come into play, and where we then try to unlock these opportunities by incorporating, say, nature-based solutions in master planning and so forth. That's where we're seeing the true advantage coming in order for us to promote this long-term sustainable development mandate that we have as a bank. So for us, it's really leveraging of nature as an asset class and ensuring that it is just the right way to do infrastructure. And the concept of landscape finance as well as nature-based solutions, it's not really new. Some of the great engineering firms, over the past few decades have been actually doing this kind of work for a very long time. So I like the term landscape design because it's actually going back to first principles in terms of engineering and promoting the landscape and ecological kind of corridors and so forth as a way in which to promote long-term sustainability of infrastructure.
Hey, thanks for that, Suloshni. And can you give an example of a transaction where you have Main Street nature considerations that you're proud of?
We started to use it quite a bit in our hard infrastructure, so like as built, where it's just buildings, office buildings, and then we're trying to start to incorporate it more in urban kind of areas and nodes. So where you are able to promote the social corridors as well as urban design elements that make sense, that's where we're starting to really incorporate it, because we do a lot of those types of um, infrastructure. But across the border into the SADC region, for instance, when you are starting to look at things like schools, right? Schools as well as clinics, accommodation, we do a lot of student accommodation, for instance. You can start to build in all of those parameters, and then by doing that, you're incorporating the climate slash nature-based side of it to promote overall social cohesion and obviously the overall resilience of the development.
Thanks for that. Mirai, before you entered in the room, I showed a slide from your very important report, The State of Nature Finance. So UNEP is the author of that report, and I keep referring to it nearly every panel meeting where I am. So thanks for that great thought leadership. But same question to you, Mirai. So how does this landscape finance approach resonate with UNEP? Can you maybe also give some examples what UNEP is doing in this space when it comes to nature finance?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And sorry I was late. I'm limping today, so it's difficult to run around. Um, I mean, because we are a UN entity and we have a global reach, I think we have examples that resonate. We have a partnership with Rabobank. We have a initiative that supports entrepreneurs for nature, that is looking at the process from ideation all the way to bringing those projects to incubation, acceleration, and then matching with financiers. And in that sense, we see, and we have a project also on nature-based infrastructure as well, on combining nature-based solutions and infrastructure. One of the benefits of the landscape approach is that it actually brings different stakeholders and different users of land together. I think that one of the key difficulties that we find in advancing nature-based solutions is always the trade-off. The trade-off between food production and nature conservation, the trade-off between deployment of energy and nature conservation, between generation of income, particularly when the signal from the financial institutions is one that is singularly focused on return on investment. We see that it becomes difficult to bridge that balance. So when you look at it from a more holistic point of view, at the landscape level, it allows the valorization or valuation of ecosystem services. And we see that whether it's banks or the private sector, this resonates very strongly, because then it becomes about securing the supply chain. It becomes about mitigating risks that are facing the operations and the functioning of whether it's the private sector entity, the enterprise, at the farm level, and it secures the loan, or it secures the funding as well. So there is less default when we see that, or the risk of defaulting, or the risk of climate impacts, for example, having a strong detrimental impact on infrastructure, significantly reduces when that landscape approach is adopted. And so we see that, for example, with IFAC, which is focused on the Cerrado and Acre states, where we work with Rabobank as well, and where there is that mechanism also, similarly to what has been mentioned, of providing a sweetener to the interest rate where and if farmers go beyond the legal requirement in terms of for a set aside on soy and other commodity productions. What we see is that there is a shift away from a focus on return on investment and bottom line, and we see that in that sense across a vertical landscape. So we're seeing it from the national level, where governments are starting to think about nature accounting, or the introduction of nature in national accounts, and not only looking at nature as a free asset that can be utilized, extracted, and then where public finance needs to actually restore. So that's the first level. And then we see that there's a trickle-down effect. And it's been very, very interesting to witness that. And that's what we see also, for example, through Agri-3 Fund or through other funds where we have been operating. We have had some failures as well. And
Yeah,
we've learned quite a bit from
give me
them.
one. Give me one failure.
Well, I mean, for example, one failure was the Tropical Land Use Finance Facility that we had launched with Indonesia, with ADM Capital, with BNP Paribas, that had a special purpose vehicle that was intended to support landscape finance, or the deployment of financial instruments like guarantees and bonds and so on. We realized that a third-party verification is absolutely necessary, that all of us being clear, and this is something that we still struggle with, is that when there's a financial transaction, there's a non-disclosure agreement. There are aspects of the financial transaction that are not secret, but what's the word? Someone help? You know, that are confidential, that are confidential and that cannot be disclosed. And so if not everyone, because the landscape approach also requires that we operate with an ecosystem of actors. And so when not everyone is at the same level of understanding and sharing of information, then it becomes very complicated because it affects the transparency in terms of the KPIs, how are they measured, what is the baseline, what are we aiming for, how is the funding structured, and what is the result of that.
All right. It's interesting because in this week there's another TFFF being launched, so maybe in the next round you can reflect on that, right? So, Fernanda, back to you. So, you're a cosmetics company and you have factories, but you also have suppliers that are operating from these nature abundant places, right? And I'm sure that you are doing your share on transitioning towards nature positive, but outside the fence line of your operations, outside the fence line of your suppliers, what other actors are needed to help you in that journey? So think about governments, think about NGOs like ourselves, think about other banks, other companies.
For sure. Everything that we need to do in this agenda, we need to work in collaboration. It's impossible to evolve anything in this agenda, especially here in the Amazon, if you don't know, if you don't adapt, and if you don't collaborate. So we are working, for example, with Embrapa, that is a Brazilian research institute, for more than 15 years to create an agroforest system to change our palm oil to an agroforest system from monoculture uh, to an agroforest system. So I think it's completely necessary. For example, we recently launched blended finance that we are collaborating with a security. How I don't know how can I say, but it's a small bank, a securitizadora,
Yeah, yeah. Development bank.
development bank, IFC, IDB, and everything to allow access to the smallholders to start their journey in the landscape. So I think it's very important. Our our leaders, our CEOs, all the team, not only the guys from sustainability in Natura, our CFO, our CEO, are connected in this agenda with us, helping in this advocacy and helping us to connect the collaboration between the different parts, the different stakeholders. And even our shareholders, for example, last year we launched a sustainable linked bond connected with our KPIs related to bioeconomy. So I think it's very, very important to have this kind of panel, this kind of discussion. I appreciate. And I think it's very,
Can you tell a little bit more about this bond?
this bond is, it was launched to help us to accelerate our research and development with these local communities. We are committed to achieve more than 55 new ingredients until 2030. So we work with SPO and a lot of different part, the third part, to create a new idea, combined the sustainable linked bond that usually we are invited to launch a linked bond that related with our SBTI targets and all the things related to climate. And we challenge them to launch this sustainable linked bond connected with our bioeconomy targets. So it was hard. Priscilla is the one that is leading this agenda in Natura. She's here. She could help us with more details.
All right, thanks for that. Over to you, Lika. You have all these acronyms like TNFD, SPTN, SPTI. So how are you using all these acronyms to start quantifying your nature-related risks, opportunities in your portfolio? And I would also like to hear a little bit about your, what do you call it, nature roadmap, or so the work that you launched within the bank to actually then start to addressing these risks and opportunities.
So let me start to explain a little bit how our sustainability strategy look like. So we have three aspirations. One is on climate. We want to act on climate. We want to value nature, and we want to enable people. We do that through three levers. One is through our clients, because of course Rabobank would not exist without our clients. So we want to help our clients towards a greener future. The second one is our portfolio, very important one. So we want to green our portfolio. I will come back to that later. And the third one is system. And I think that's also a very important one to mention here, because events like this, conversations like this, collaboration with policymakers, etc., is very needed to shift the system towards a system that enables the green transition. So these are the three levers, and we do that through the food system transition and an energy transition. Of course, food system transition for Rabobank is much bigger, and we're focused on the food system transition in this COP. So, but this is our strategy globally. So now on portfolio. We were one of the first adopters of TNFD, so we were in amongst
What
the
is
first
TNFD? Can you explain?
it's uh, it's a task force, nature-related finance disclosure. That's the acronym. But what it does is it helps you make the analysis on your impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities. And that's very helpful because we of course did this as we were one of the first adopters or the first adopter. And what it showed was that 85% of Rabobank's portfolio is highly or very highly dependent on nature. And for us, sustainability people, that was not really a surprise, right? We're very active in food and ag, so not a big surprise. But the number 85% really resonated in the board, because the board suddenly thought, okay, so there is a big risk here. And banks are about risk. So, so the TNFD analysis was very, very important for Rabobank to really get it internally grounded, especially in senior level. So what we did with the analysis, and that maybe refers back to the landscape approach, we defined 10 sector region combinations with the highest impact on nature and the highest dependency on nature. So for example, in Brazil, it's soy and cerrado, it's I think beef in Australia. So we defined different sector region combinations, and on those combinations we are now creating plans to transition to a greener future.
And do you only see this as a risk approach, or do you also see that could generate new opportunities with your clients?
For sure, for sure. In general, what we see is that our clients now really realize that it's not something nice to do. Sustainability is not something ethical. It's a necessity, because we see the physical risks very clearly. So
We are feeling now the physical risk.
yeah, yeah. And I think all of our clients do. So the coffee price is raised like 50% this year. So cocoa, everything is under pressure. So resilience in the value chain is very important. On the opportunity side, which we are also working on with WWF, we're really looking to make a bridge between business and sustainability. Because what we also see within Rabobank, the bankers are mainly traditional bankers. So there's still quite a gap between the sustainability department and the bankers. So with the opportunities analysis
different type of maturity in terms of nature-based solutions. In SA, it's quite mature now. I mean, 5 years ago, when you talk to the commercial banking sector in SA, they are not comfortable to talk about nature-based solutions. Now we are in a much better position only because people have got their heads around climate and understanding contingency provisioning on the balance sheet, and then now nature-based solution has really taken over.
Right.
So if I think to the SADC region, and I just made a couple of points because all of this is also in our white paper that we did and launched last year, and we exhausted that to death. And that was mainly because of the collaborative kind of information we wanted to share with the TNFD, because TNFD were one of our most strategic partners, as well as using WWF's tools. We made use of the South African National Biodiversity Institute mapping and so forth for their work. So we really tried to test all of those tools and try to debug it in a sense. So regulatory uncertainty and misaligned incentives, inconsistent short-term government policies, and this is with the SADC region that I'm talking about. There's a lot of sectoral silos in between ministries, the way they work in certain countries in SADC region. Responsibilities and budgets for nature-based solutions, for instance, they're often quite fragmented. Insufficient public resources to do nature-based solutions, right? I sat on a panel some time ago with the Kenyan Ministry of Finance. We lend to the sovereigns, right? And we have a high exposure to local government as well. When you're dealing with sovereign loans, the way they package it is literally a corporate loan. So it's 20 to 50 of these projects that are sitting there and are easily able to incorporate nature-based solutions, especially your linear projects, your dams, and so forth. But if you package it under a sovereign loan, how do you leverage KPIs that are specific to nature-based solutions? Because ultimately, you want to access the finance, you want to incentivize these governments to actually, incorporate this, but then at the same time, you have to give your investors what they want, which is they want the reporting. And so that is the chicken and egg situation we're in, even with companies, right? We want to lend to them, but then we're struggling with the difficulty they struggle with difficulty in valuing ecosystem services, for instance. The standardized methodologies, for instance, is still a problem. Limited pipeline of scalable projects, and still there's a high perceived risk around nature-based solutions from our investor side, right? So what we are also doing as well is we started to work with some of the consultants on the ground. They are the closest to infrastructure, planning, and so forth. If you are not able to advise your client, your developers, on incorporating these parameters, these requirements, they're not going to do it. Then it comes to our desk in the banking world, and then we are unable to unlock because we can't tick a box. Now we have to retrospectively try to bring these kinds of requirements in order for the developer to gain access to this type of advantages, which in the long run, they will reap the reward. Upfront, there are some costs, but that is not the job only of a bank. It is also the job of the consultants that are advising the clients. So we are now sitting to advise consultants in the SA space, and then we're also starting to work quite closely with ISSB. In SA, for instance, we're working very close with ISSB in terms of we are looking at climate disclosure regulation potentially in SA.
Okay.
So the convergence is coming, it's inevitable. And I've heard recently as well that ISSB is also starting to sanction the TNFD recommendations,
That's
which
great
is
news, right?
great news.
Yeah.
So from an enabling environment perspective, that is spot on. And we are working with our companies association in the country and trying to really understand how do we support them. So we are also trying to make sure we have a technical data kind of center that is set up, sanctioned through all of these entities, including the WWF, TNFD, and so forth, so that we develop a bit of a regional kind of hub for the African markets.
Fantastic.
So hopefully,
See, Leslie,
that's-
I need to stop you
Thank
there
you.
because I also want to go to the room pretty soon. But Mirai, back to your State of Nature Finance report that you launch every year, and I think every year it's becoming a little bit more, but it's still by far not enough, right? So I want to talk to you about the nature finance gap, which is now at 942 billion a year. And I want to talk to you about what do you see as the main obstacles, both from a systemic level, but also at the landscape level, that currently we need to address as a coalition to catalyze and accelerate this nature finance gap and make it smaller?
Well,
Difficult question, huh?
yes, it is. But at the same time, it's rather easy because it's not a lack of funding. It's that the funding is going to the wrong place. So you've picked up on the financing gap for nature, but you didn't pick up on the financial flows that are actually destroying nature. And that's in the order of 7 trillion. So the question is, how do we redirect those towards not
How? Tell me
impacting
how.
nature? Well, and this is where the complication is that there isn't lack of funding or lack of solutions. There is, I think that the complexity lies a little bit elsewhere. The complexity lies in the political economy. Complexity lies in the power dynamics. It lies in enshrined kind of behaviors and perceptions and values about what progress is, about what a successful business is, about what a successful enterprise is. And also lies, here is partly our responsibility collectively as the non-private state actors in that space, is that we've fragmented it way too much. It's a huge load on a bank or on a company to have to comply with TNFD, TCFD, SBTI, do their own reporting. Now there's something that is coming up on water as well, I understand. So it's like those one layer on top of the other. And even though they're voluntary, but at the end of the day, there's a certain level of accountability and credibility that is associated with ESG and with those standards that make it so that everyone wants to kind of demonstrate that they're moving in that direction, and then it becomes very complicated. I think the other thing, I mean, maybe in relation to that as well, is that we tend to over-complexify things that should be simple. So, for example, on monitoring, reporting, and verification, we tend to want to make it super complicated, and and then then the transaction cost becomes too high. Then it takes too long. It takes too much time, and then it becomes a deterrent. One of the things that we've realized through our work is that when you talk about medium term from a conservation or kind of a restoration or like a conservation organization, NGO, UN, ministries, and so on, we're talking about 5 to 10 years. When you say medium term to a private sector enterprise, this is more like 2 years down the line. So there's a mismatch in time scale. And there's also, I think, a mismatch in terms of ambition. And I want to tie that back. I think someone before me mentioned ticket sizes. For an investor to come in, we work a lot with the Singapore Sustainable Finance Association. And for example, for them, the minimum ticket size is 50 million. That means aggregating in certain countries, aggregating up to 500, 1,000. I saw you had the Congo Basin. We're working with Pro Congo on a Pro Congo project. in the Congo, that means aggregating at least 2,000 to 5,000 producers to be able to meet that entry ticket size. So I think that
Scale,
more of
right?
these
Yeah.
conversations are necessary
Right.
so that we kind of try to start and find each other in the middle and see what are the requirements that help us push that agenda forward.
Fantastic. Okay, we have 10 minutes left, so I want to check with the room if there's a question. Yeah, please go ahead. Can someone give the mic to him? Oh, there's a mic. Maybe you can say your name and your organization.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can't-
I a bit close to your. Yeah.
Is that better? Matt Hanford with EY. Thank you very much. This has been a fantastic panel. Fernanda, I was at the Natura office in Sao Paulo for a WBCSD event. I love what you've done with incorporating nature all around the office. I try not to be too gloomy with these things. I think there's so much opportunity. I think there's also so many barriers, and Murray did a great job in articulating some of the issues, I think, with catalyzing finance. I really worry about the amounts needed and the infrastructure, the financial infrastructure on the ground. The amount of scaling that realistically needs to happen is like exponential. And so one thing I'm curious, and Saloshni, I'm South African as well, so I'm curious, microfinance, the role that has to play. You don't then have a ticket size issue, perhaps, and it can be far more customized or configured to the geolocation and the issue prevalent in that specific region. So I think that's something that really needs to be thought about. And then just an observation, we've had multiple, I mean, we all come to these COPs. Every COP, there's multiple declarations and announcements of new things, new data platforms and portals and metrics and standards. And I think Murray highlighted that we're supposed to be harmonizing, and it seems like we're going in the opposite direction. We're fragmenting. WBCSD and Capitals Coalition just announced a new thing the other day. We have TNFD that is coming on with SPTI now, supposedly or apparently, which I think these are all good things in isolation, but it creates more complexity for private capital and private credit, ultimately. And all of these things, I think, are aimed at disclosure, not for credit risk. And there is such a big difference for those of us that live in the credit risk side. The reporting, the metrics for that is very different to the types
Can you get to your question?
Yeah, sorry. It was an observation. My question really is around microfinance,
Right.
maybe.
Who wants to pick that up?
So within Rabobank, within Rabobank we have Rabo Foundation, and Rabo Foundation is financing smallholder farmers in developing countries with what we call soft loans, so better conditions. We do not finance the smallholder directly. We finance the cooperatives that they are a member of, so or the MFI that is there locally. What we try to do with Rabo Foundation is to build the bridge to a local bank, for example, in Africa. So we also have a Rabo Partnerships department, which is taking stakes in banks in Africa, in Latin America. We've got stakes in Sicredi here in Brazil, to help them finance the food and ag sector. Because I want to mention something, and this is particularly for the food and ag sector. Banks are really risk reverse to finance the food and ag sector because it's full of risks. So you really have to understand the value chain, the farmer, the processor. And if you, as a bank, don't have that knowledge, it's really hard to build the right credit models, to build the right risk models. So that's, I think, one of the issues why the food and ag sector is less banked than other sectors. So what we try to do with Rabo Foundation, Rabo Partnerships, is really build that bridge for smaller farmers, united in cooperatives or MFIs, to in the end, bank with a normal, regular local bank. So we help these banks to really finance the food and ag sector. And I think that is something we should accelerate, actually, in developing countries. Yeah.
I gave away my mic. I should have never done that because. Is there another mic here? Oh, yeah. Good. Is there another question? Yeah?
Thank you for this valuable panel and sharing your experiences. My name is Gülçin. I'm from Industrial Development Bank of Turkey. I have a question about the landscape finance model concept. How are these landscape finance regions are selected? For example, is there eligibility criteria or any prioritization of risks? Should the area has some biodiversity value? What is the starting point of
I
this?
like that question, and probably I'm the one who can answer that. So WWF for the past half century has worked in 300 landscapes over the world. And when I say landscape, I'm also talking about riverscapes, seascapes, right? So it's the umbrella. And in all these landscapes, there's private sector, there are people, and there's nature to be protected. Where we're going to scale, you saw the map, so where we're going to scale depends on also traction. So the coalitions we can build with financiers in Turkey, in other countries. So if there's private sector that has supply chains in these landscapes, if there are banks that want to finance the transition, if there's nature to be protected, please come to WWF and we see if there are other actors that want to join it. So it's still flexible. There's 300 landscapes that we can select from. I'm having side conversations here at COP, and slowly there's a coalition that is, trying to prioritize a couple of these landscapes. But it really depends on the energy, right? I think I have to get to a close of this session. Dana, can you show the last slide, please? So what I hear from the panel is a kind of a alignment and endorsement on this landscape finance approach. It resonates. That's what I heard from the ladies next to me. And by the way, Zhao didn't show up, so it stayed an all-female panel. So thanks for your valuable input, and I really want to invite you to join the coalition and keep working with WF and many other actors to bring some rigor in this, because I agree with the gentleman here. There's a lot of initiative, but I think landscapes could be units where we bring some order into this. So we can't keep on talking at the systemic global level, but to bring it to the ground, right? So in order to help different actors to do that, we are launching a toolkit today. So I invite you to scan the QR code and download the toolkit that is relevant for your organization. So for financial institutions, we launched a white paper that is explaining what financial institutions can do. For NGOs, governments, development banks, we launched a playbook. We launched a guide for a broader audience together with Sustainable Finance Coalition and Conservation Capital. So no lack of reports, no lack of guidance. Now it has to come to action, right? So thanks a lot for your attention, and hope to talk to you soon about this topic.